Monday morning, February 23, 2026. Würzburg Central Station, Bavaria, Germany. Hundreds of commuters in motion, and in the middle of all that movement, something completely still. A literature cart. 2 or 3 people standing quietly beside it. Jehovah's Witnesses, with full municipal permission to be exactly where they were. At 7:50 in the morning, a 35-year-old man walks through the entrance doors. He is not looking for a train. He pulls out a knife and goes straight for the cart. If you were ever a Jehovah's Witness, if you ever stood beside one of those carts, if you ever did street witnessing, if you ever sat through a Watchtower study, you already know what happens next. Not just in that station. You know what happens inside the organization the moment an attack like this becomes public. Because this story has 2 layers. What happened in Würzburg, and what the Watchtower Society will do with what happened in Würzburg. Today, we are covering both. The attacker does not wander. He does not hesitate. He moves in a straight line toward the literature cart, as if that destination had been fixed in his mind long before he walked through those doors. Standing at the cart is, among others, a 68-year-old man. He has no time to react. The attacker goes for him first, attempting to stab him with a knife. 2 other members of the group, a 55-year-old and a 51-year-old, are physically assaulted in the chaos that follows. The entrance hall fractures in seconds. The overhead announcement system keeps reading out arrivals and departures in a calm, automated voice, completely indifferent to what is happening below the speakers. Then something unexpected happens. Bystanders move toward the attacker, not away from him. Ordinary commuters and travelers make the decision to intervene physically. Critically, a plainclothes police officer who happens to be present joins them. Together, they take the attacker down and hold him to the ground before a single uniformed patrol arrives. The suspect, a 35-year-old Afghan national, is placed under formal arrest. All 3 victims survive without knife wounds, minor physical injuries, significant psychological trauma. The charge, attempted homicide. The question of ideological motive is left open pending investigation. The attack lasted less than 2 minutes. What it will be used for inside the organization will last much longer. In the hours that follow, Würzburg criminal police seal the scene, pull surveillance footage from throughout the station and surrounding streets, and execute a search of the suspect's apartment. A public appeal goes out for witnesses. The legal framework is attempted homicide. Whether hate crime statutes apply, whether there is a documented ideological motive behind the specific targeting of this religious group, investigators say they cannot confirm immediately. What they confirm is simpler. 3 people were targeted. The target was not random. The attacker went directly for the cart, for the people standing beside it, for the symbol of what that cart represents. Those are the facts the investigation is working with. And those are exactly the facts the Watchtower Society's communications department will work with too, though in a very different direction. If you spent any significant time inside the organization, you do not need me to explain what happens next at a strategic level. You have seen this before. You probably sat through the talks. You may have even felt the emotional charge in the room when these events were announced. But let's name it explicitly, because naming it is how you see through it. Step 1 is the announcement. Within days, sometimes hours, of a public attack on members in the field, the organization's internal communication channels activate. Branch offices notify congregations. Elders receive guidance on how to frame the event for the rank and file. The event is not presented as a random act of violence by a disturbed individual. It is presented as evidence of a spiritual reality that Jehovah's Witnesses have always known to be true, that Satan's world is hostile to God's people, and that hostility is intensifying as the end approaches. That framing is not accidental. It is load-bearing theology. The book of Revelation describes a global attack on God's people in the last days. The Watchtower has been teaching for decades that this prophesied attack is coming, first from governments, then from the general population. Every incident of violence against members in the field becomes, in this framework, a data point confirming the prophetic timeline. Not a tragedy to be processed, a sign to be recognized. For an active Jehovah's Witness sitting in a kingdom hall hearing about Würzburg, the emotional response that the organization cultivates is not primarily grief. It is vindication. It is the feeling of recognizing something you were told to expect. It is a tightening of identity. We knew this was coming. We were right. We are the ones Satan is targeting, because we are the ones with the truth. That feeling is powerful, and it is manufactured. Step 2 is the martyrdom framing. The 3 people who were attacked in Würzburg become more than victims of a violent crime. They become witnesses in the original Greek sense of the word, martyrs. People who suffered for their faith. Their names may be shared in congregations. Their courage in continuing to stand at the cart, their faithfulness to their assignment, will be held up as an example. Pay close attention to the specific language that will be used when this event reaches the platform. Words like faithful, steadfast, not abandoning their post. The cart witnessing assignment is framed internally as a privilege and a spiritual responsibility. Leaving the cart when things get difficult, even dangerous, would be framed as a failure of faith. Staying is framed as courage. The fact that 3 people were injured is not evidence that the strategy needs to be reconsidered. It is evidence of their devotion. This is how the organization protects itself from any internal questioning of whether cart witnessing, as a fixed and visible and predictable format, creates unnecessary risk for the people doing it. That question is not allowed to form because the event has already been repackaged into a testimony of faithfulness. Step 3 is the reinforcement loop. In the weeks following an event like Würzburg, watch for it to appear in congregation talks, in circuit assembly programs, potentially in Watchtower study articles. Watch for the phrase "endure to the end." Watch for references to Matthew 24 and the signs of the conclusion of the system of things. Watch for the suggestion, never stated quite explicitly, always implied, that the frequency of these events is itself a sign that the end is very close. For someone still inside the organization, this loop is nearly invisible from the inside. It does not feel like manipulation. It feels like spiritual insight. It feels like confirmation that the world is becoming what the Bible said it would become, and that staying faithful inside the organization is the only rational response. That is precisely what makes it effective. And that is precisely what makes it worth examining. Here is the question that will never be asked from the platform after Würzburg. Is the cart witnessing format itself creating unnecessary danger for the people assigned to it? Cart witnessing replaced the traditional, house-to-house model for a reason. Door-to-door work was declining in effectiveness. The public was increasingly resistant. The format was becoming a source of embarrassment rather than fruitful territory. Carts offered a solution, visible, low pressure, requiring less verbal engagement, and carrying the appearance of modern, confident public presence rather than the anxious door-knocking that many members had always found deeply uncomfortable. But here is what changed structurally. House-to-house work was mobile. If a situation became hostile, the person at the door could leave. They could step back, walk away, move on to the next address. There was an exit built into every single interaction. A cart has no exit. It is positioned in a specific public location under a municipal permit. The people staffing it are committed to being exactly there, exactly visible, exactly stationary, for a scheduled period of time. They cannot leave when things escalate without abandoning the assignment. And abandoning the assignment carries its own social and spiritual cost inside the congregation. That immobility, which was designed to project confidence, is a structural vulnerability. It makes the people staffing the cart predictable, locatable, plannable around. For the vast majority of people who walk past, it means nothing. But at the outer edge of radicalized thinking, of any ideology, any religion, any worldview, a fixed, identifiable symbol of what you consider an enemy is exactly what certain kinds of dangerous minds are looking for. The organization knows this. They are not naive. But acknowledging it publicly would require acknowledging that the strategy exposes members to risk, and that acknowledgement would undermine the theological framing of the cart as a spiritual privilege and a sign of organizational maturity. So the risk stays unacknowledged, the assignment stays mandatory, and the people standing beside the cart stay exposed. This is worth sitting with, especially if you were ever one of those people. Würzburg in February 2026 is not the first time this has happened in Germany. In March 2023, a gunman entered a Kingdom Hall in Hamburg's Alsterdorf district and opened fire. Multiple people died. The attacker was a former member. German authorities later revealed that police had received a warning about him weeks before the shooting. A warning that he harbored specific, documented hostility toward Jehovah's Witnesses. The warning was assessed. His legally owned firearm was not removed. Weeks later, he used it. 2 incidents in Germany within 3 years. Different attackers, different weapons, different scales of violence. One from inside the community, one apparently from outside it, but the same target. The same visible, publicly positioned people. And in both cases, the organization's response followed the same internal logic. Not a reassessment of risk, not a structural review of how members in the field are protected. A reinforcement of the persecution narrative. A deepening of the US versus Satan's world framework that keeps members psychologically inside the boundary and emotionally resistant to outside perspectives. That is the pattern that matters here. Not just the violence, which is real and condemnable and deserves to be named as such, but the way the organization metabolizes violence against its own members into fuel for continued control. The people in Würzburg deserve to go home safely. The people in Hamburg deserve to go home safely. They are victims twice, once by the attacker and once by a system that will use their suffering to tighten its grip on everyone still inside. If you are watching this and you are still inside the organization, I want to say something directly to you. When you hear about Würzburg from the platform, and you will hear about it, pay attention to what questions are not being asked. Pay attention to whether anyone asks if the card assignment itself should be reconsidered. Pay attention to whether the event is processed as a human tragedy, or whether it is immediately absorbed into a prophetic timeline that conveniently asks nothing of the organization and demands only more faithfulness from you. The 3 people who were attacked in Würzburg are real people with real trauma. They deserve genuine care, not a speaking slot at a circuit assembly. And if you are watching this as a former member, if you recognize every single step of the playbook I described in Part 4, I want to hear from you. Did you ever witness hostility at a cart witnessing stand? Did you ever feel the discomfort of being a fixed, visible, immovable target in a public space, and then feel guilty for feeling that discomfort? Drop it in the comments, because this story is bigger than one attack in one German city. It is about what happens to people when an institution is more invested in its own narrative than in the safety of the people living inside it. And that conversation is worth having.